okay, not one. She's never missed a treatment session. She goes to daily meetings. She has a sponsor. She's done all 12 steps, judges, all 12 steps and completed them. She even has gotten into service. She's not only doing coffee and setting up the chairs at the meeting, but she's going to secretary a meeting because someone's been ill next week. And wow, she thinks it's time to graduate. She's asking you for a successful completion of treatment because the treatment provider says she's done wonderfully. She's completed every one of her sessions, and she would also like you to terminate probation and give her record clearance now. And so what are you going to do about that? Volunteers, come on.
We have some guidelines set up in our county for what constitutes successful completion,
Okay.
which includes a period of time after completion of formal treatment, that you maintain sobriety by clean test through probation, that you continue to attend a certain number of meetings. We may reduce it.
But Nancy, she's in front of you now, and she's all excited.
And
Are you going
And
to tell her
we-
to go read the guidelines?
I will tell her briefly what the guidelines are, and we give her at that same time a lot of positive reinforcement
Okay.
for what she has done. We make a big deal, I will always discuss with her how happy I am that she's secretarying a meeting, that she's gotten into service, how happy I am, and I'll use her as an example for everybody else that's in the audience of how impressed the court is when someone goes to extra meetings, because it really means they're getting it. They're not just filling a chair, and how important this is and the safety net. Kind of make her stand out to the other people that are in the program. And then just let her know that because it is a chronic situation and a chronic illness that she's dealing with, we want to make sure not just that she has her tools, but that she knows how to use them. And so we want to give her a period of about 6 months when she'll be out there facing the real bumps in the road that come along for all of us.
Are you going to tell her that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I
Pat.
often ask them to talk to their sponsor. Sponsors know the score.
Yeah.
They know it's a relapsing disease. They know the thing called the pink cloud, where they run like the wind for a few months until they break up with a boyfriend, or a child gets sick, or their mother dies, and suddenly the first sign of stress, and they're back to the old habits. And I actually talk about those things from the bench as well if I need to. But I often refer them to their sponsor and say, I'll tell you what, talk to your sponsor, and next court hearing, which may be 90 days out, you tell me what your sponsor says about dismissing these charges at this early point in time. And, or bring your sponsor in, and we'll talk with the sponsor about this. And that is often a sobering second view, not just the court view or the probation view, but the view of somebody who's been there and done that.
Pat has brought up one point that we very seldom hear talked about in training conferences, and that is that resource of AA and NA and the sponsor, and working the steps, and the sponsor letter. A lot of judges are totally unfamiliar with this, and there is disagreement in feeling that it's a religious-based type program, but other judges say this is terribly effective, and if there is nothing, just simply going to the meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, has worked for thousands of addicts who have never been able to get into treatment. What do you think about that?
We are in their lives for a very short period of time. A year, 16, 18 months, 3 years at the outside, and they're back in the world from which they came. Our best tactic for their benefit is to associate them with a community in recovery and a sponsor in recovery. It's a relapsing brain disease, and if we don't equip them with a support team that is beyond their family, which is usually a using family as well, and beyond the old friendship circle, which is composed of all users and dealers, we've not done them any favors at all. I mean, just to bring them into court and to have them go to treatment and turn them loose back into the community is a remarkably short-sighted view of recovery. Our best strategy is to attach them to that recovering community, and that's where success comes.
To begin with, of course, we have the issue of what exactly is a violation of probation, and it's set out in the statute. drug-related and non-drug-related, but let's try to make this pretty simple. Let's take as our first example, or hypothetical. The client is on Proposition 36, eligible for the program, and within a couple of months, while doing well in treatment, commits a new non-drug offense, petty theft, steals a bicycle worth $380. And he's now back before you. Violation of probation, clearly. He's been convicted of that offense. Is he disqualified from Proposition 36? This is clearly a non-drug violation of probation. What are you going to do with this client? How do you view this?
Take a violation and get him back in program.
Move him right
he-
on.
He may have to do some time behind the petty theft, and that's an opportunity in our court for treatment in jail. And so we've got kind of a plus on that one. But clearly he needs, most likely that bike was stolen to sell, to buy the goods that he needs to maintain his lifestyle.
Or to get to treatment. He might have needed it to get to treatment.
Or maintain his lifestyle.
Right.
I'm going to buy Pat's explanation, I think.
All right, so let's take it to the next step. This is the defendant who has this petty theft, all right? And now it's a little later, and he's managed to pick up 2 more violations of probation. However, these are drug-related. He failed to stay in treatment. He missed too many sessions and was discharged, and he didn't report to probation. And you heard those, and you admonished him, and you had a long discussion with him. You tried to motivate him and so forth, as you've all described. But now he's got 3 violations of probation. 2 drug-related and 1 non-drug related. And so, is this person out?
No.
Or do we have to wait for that 3rd drug-related until he's out?
I think we have to wait till either a finding on the 2nd that he's not amenable to treatment, or there's the 3rd drug-related violation.
Okay, so now you've raised this issue. I think it's an important one. Not amenable to treatment. Given what little we know about this defendant, would you hold a hearing as to whether or not or consider it with the team as to whether he's amenable?
Yeah, I would want some input from whatever treatment provider he was seeing. We would probably get a new substance abuse assessment. We use the tool, the ASUS, whatever that acronym is. I would want another substance abuse assessment. I would want our own people to take a look at this defendant, to meet with him and give me an idea of whether they feel he's amenable to treatment. And one of the things we had to talk about as a team was amenability to treatment has to mean, or at least we have to interpret it to mean, at this point in time. Because a lot of our treatment providers and our substance abuse specialists were very reluctant to find that somebody was unamenable to any form of treatment, whatever, whenever. And so what we have to do is focus on, is this defendant amenable to treatment right now? Is he at a point in his life where he is willing to accept treatment, or is he not at his bottom? Is he not at a point where he's willing to own this disease and do something about it? And if that's the case, he may be unamenable to treatment now. Prop 36 may be appropriate. And when I have made those findings, and I have made those findings, I try to explain to the defendant that this is a disease that progresses. And he has a choice when he completes whatever the consequence is going to be, to get treatment on his own, to get treatment through continuing probation or parole. And if he doesn't do that and does reoffend, he will have another opportunity, and maybe he'll be ready for it then, or she.
Okay, but you would find that, given the right circumstances, the defendant unamenable.
Yes.
Okay, Pat?
I make a finding, it's limited to 36. I say this person is no longer amenable to treatment under the provisions of Prop 36. And that acknowledges that it is not the strongest, longest, and best program that we have available to the client, and there are other options still available on general terms of probation. And so I will knock him out of 36 right into general terms of probation, which gives me all the power that I need in the drug court model to work with this client, including sanctions.
There are some people in that scenario, and that's what I've heard here is exactly what we do in Santa Maria. It's an individual assessment as to this defendant at this point in time, because there are some people in that situation that clearly continue to be amenable for treatment. We just have to figure out the right fit. Others clearly are not, and we have to make that decision. But that involves, weighing the pros and cons as to each defendant when they reach that point in time. That also takes the burden of our time. That's where the staffing comes in. That's where the team approach comes in. That's where it's so critical to come to that point.
But let me ask you this. In terms of what you're trying to do, does it really matter whether we make this fine distinction between what is drug-related and non-drug related? For example, I think most judges would say failure to show up in court and failure to show up at probation is really not drug-related. I mean, but leaving that aside, isn't what we're really doing here is trying to motivate this client, and they've screwed up, this is a violation of probation, and we're not that concerned as to whether it's drug-related or non-drug related in terms of technicalities. Anybody have any response to that?
Yeah, I think that they're all drug-related, except a new offense.
Okay.
And that may be
A new
drug-related.
non-drug
Non-drug
offense,
offense.
right.
And in every court, you've got to negotiate with your team, with the DA and the public defender, on how you treat these. And we probably all come to a different conclusion, but once you've arrived at that conclusion about how you treat these violations, and the team is comfortable with those decisions, then you can usually keep before them the ideal model, and that is renewed treatment if at all possible. So you keep on trying to work this person into a program that will finally have an effect. And you can make a violation, and you can have 1, 2, 3, 5, if you can all agree. This person is making some limited progress, and maybe if we step him now into a residential program for a while, or get a sober living home environment for him or her, or have some other option available, then we'll still live with this person. 36 sometimes has resources that other programs don't. I mean, there are dedicated beds to 36. And if you can capture them in a timely way, which is a problem, but if you can capture them in a timely way, those are excellent therapeutic settings for a client in habitual relapse, even though they've screwed up a dozen times. But it's a matter of how much your team can tolerate in terms of taking violations and keeping people in 36.
And you raise another issue with that answer that I am finding to be very interesting in terms of those courts and counties that are having financial difficulties. And that is the pressure because of the lack of funds for Prop 36. Number one, if you find the defendant, for example, in San Bernardino County, if you find him to have struck out in 36, the third violation, you only have so much funding for drug court, and you have literally no general funding, as I recall, and after the budget now, I don't think you will have a penny to put him into some other kind of treatment that through probation. Do you ever hold back on that third violation to keep him in 36?
You bet. We all understand the limited balance here of resources and where they're currently allocated, how much we have available here and over there. And so we all gather at the bench sometimes and say, okay, if it goes to drug court, we're at our limit right now. Every counselor is fully staffed with clients. We have no room in drug court. What about option B or C? And we, Salvation Army, well, no, they're full also. So let's hang with this person for a while in 36 and see if we can make some progress and wait for a better day for option B and C. That's a regular discussion.
I continue on a number of cases. I've continued the violation of probation hearing and kind of let the client know that I'm giving them a chance to prove themselves, that they're really up against that third VOP, and probation feels they shouldn't be allowed in Prop 36 anymore. They're telling me they're They're still trying, maybe they've had a couple of weeks with no positive tests. And so I'll continue the probation hearing out for about 60 days and let them know that if they can wow me in that 60 days with what they're doing, I'll dismiss the VOP, or I won't find them in violation of probation. On the one hand, it kind of puts their feet to the fire, and I'm usually fairly firm when I explain this. On the other hand, it buys me some time, and we continue as a team with some of these cases to try and find a place for them in the system, if we can't do it on the day that they come in and we're up against this third VOP. But sometimes that's what it takes.
And sometimes, realistically, we're dealing with some people in this program who really don't want to be here. That this was a get out of jail free card, and they're playing the same old addict game. They have not learned a thing, and they're not going to learn. And that's the point. I think sometimes we really do have to come to that harsh conclusion that with limited resources, we want to dedicate those resources to people that we have a chance of making some positive change on. And if we have some people who are obviously not going to benefit from this program after repeated attempts of trying to save them. You can only throw so many life preservers into the ocean, and if people aren't going to reach one of them, they're going to drown. And that's exactly the analogy I use in court. I tell them, we've tried. I have nothing left to throw you. No more lines left. And you're goodbye. You have a nice day. And we move on and try and help people that we can help. So sometimes that's a tough decision. It's a decision I don't think any of us like to make. It's a decision that, because none of us like failure. But sometimes some people are not going to make it through this program.
I sometimes give the defendant the options. I'll say, look, realistically, you're looking at 18 months. You're looking at, you're looking at the base term, mitigated term for the possession charge. You failed again, and again. We've been through this so many times. I'll give you some additional time in county jail now on the inroads program, but you've been to it twice in the last 4 years. What do you think? And they will say, I'll take my time. Just give me my time.
You let them do that.
Yeah,
Give it to
finally.
'em.
Finally, I'll let them make the decision. I see it as I have no new ideas for this person. And the team has no new suggestions as to how to conquer their addiction. And they've given up on themselves, so let them do their time, if
Okay,
that's their
let's-
choice.
Well, let me ask you about this. The defendant started out with you, and he's failed to appear for his review, and you haven't seen him in 5 months. He has no new arrest, but he hasn't done a darn thing, and now he's back before you, some 5 months later, in custody. Or the defendant who's before 36, he had been convicted of some other criminal offense, and he's serving a sentence of 60 days. But it's going to come to an end, but he's in front of you. Now, would you find such a defendant unavailable and therefore unamenable for treatment and knock him out right away?
I would want to know why he was gone for 5 months, for example, and that scenario is not uncommon. People just abscond and they're gone, and then they come back, and they're usually in custody, and they stand before the court, and they've got arrested on this warrant that we issued when they failed to appear in court for a review. And I want to know, where the heck have you been? Tell me. Well, Your Honor, I was out of state, and I was doing this, and I was doing that, but I've been clean, and look, I even have a 12-step card to show you. I was doing 12-step meetings, so I know you would want to see it when I came back to California, because I knew I was going to come back to see my family. And in that situation, we may let that person back in, but this person absconds and gets in a lot of trouble. You could see that we know what they look like when they come back in the court, and they've been using nonstop, and they look horrible. And then we have to look at some other options about residential and some other things. But usually in that situation, we give them a chance to. I do it in my court, give them a chance to get back into treatment. Let's try this again. Let's make sure that we have a connection immediately from custody into a treatment facility of some type, and I want shortened reviews. I want to know that you've gone back and re-engaged.
Yeah, I think that inquiry of the defendant is a real important step, because sometimes that uncovers issues that we need to address in terms of the whole treatment plan. We may get somebody in there that we order into a residential program. Because of funding issues in Fresno County, we get a very abbreviated probation report. We don't get any social history, we don't get any family history. So I may order someone into a residential program without knowing what his family obligations are or what's going on in his life. And he or she, between kind of a rock and a hard place, will just ignore my orders and keep working to support their family. So it's not until they come back on a violation that we find out that that's a problem. And maybe we do need to take a look at what's available to provide some alternatives. The funding crisis is causing me a little bit of anxiety in terms of how we've made our recommendations. Somebody who needs residential treatment, and we've been ordering them into residential treatment regardless of what else is going on in their lives, on the 30th of June, if he had come in on July 1st, when we'd run out of money, he wouldn't have gotten the residential treatment despite the need for it because we weren't referring. Do you know, I don't know if I'm explaining that
No,
well,
I
but I'm finding it a little troubling.
And now he has a bench warrant, and so
Yeah.
it's a number of months later before you see. What do you think about, do any of you use time as a factor? For example, the defendant's been on bench warrant for 1 year. Obviously unavailable for treatment, made himself or herself unavailable for treatment. Is that defendant, would you knock that defendant out?
No, but the DA will say, I'm going to file a FTA on this man for being gone 12,
So explain, because
18
not
months.
everyone understands. what
Failure
that
to
means.
appear.
And that's a crime.
It's a crime all by
Separate
itself.
crime.
Separate crime. However, I will not file the FTA if he agrees to go to inroads for 90 days and then back into Prop 36.
So again, we have team,
oh yeah, and
work
the,
here
and the public
and
defender will say,
agreements.
right on, here we go, let's do it. Explain to his or her client the option, and it's always done. I mean, without deviation. The guy stands still and says, I'll take it, Judge, give me inroads.
Yeah.
I'll see you in 3 months and we'll start again.
Let's move on to the determination of successful completion of treatment and completion of probation. This is, I find, very interesting. In some courts, these are two separate findings, one of them extremely difficult for some judges. The defendant is not likely to use drugs again. In other courts, they come together and the dismissal comes with them, and the record clearance, and everything is done in one package after a certain period of time. What do you do with these two concepts? I mean, the law says the defendant must either complete or not complete treatment, and you have to make a finding about that. And then the defendant obviously either completes or doesn't complete probation. But how do you handle it?
I avoid astutely the language of the statute. We sat down early on and as a team agreed that for a judge to make that finding would be a foolish errand. This is a lifelong disease. It's a relapsing disease. And there is no way in the world a judge can be intellectually honest and make that finding.
But do you come up with something short of that,
Oh,
say
yes.
90 days sobriety?
Yeah, we have standards that we've set that we agree upon as a team, we can live with. And those standards become the model we use and against which we put this man's life. But it's certainly not that finding that you've described and that's set forth in the statute.
And we've tried to incorporate some external indicia of probable success to the extent that can be predicted, like being employed, having a stable residence, obviously no new criminal involvement. Some of the things that at least some research indicates contribute to ongoing sobriety. So if we can find those things, and those are all in our criteria, then we're a little bit more comfortable in saying there has been successful completion. And
Does the completion and the termination of probation come at the same time?
that's what we have been doing.
Okay, what about you, Pat?
Yeah, it's the treatment now has been shortened, the
Right.
formal treatment, and there's no way in the world.
But you keep them coming back for
Oh,
reviews.
we keep them coming
and
back,
They go to meetings.
And usually the typical Prop 36 probationer now, between a year and 18 months out, is ready, as far as we're concerned, for dismissal of charges. We keep very few beyond 18 months unless they're just a hardcore case. Typically, we've either moved them up the treatment ladder to drug court or another appropriate, more forceful program, or they've been successful and they're out of here.
We have 3 levels of treatment. Level 3 is the most high risk defendants. 70% of our defendants in Santa Maria are level 3, and they're in treatment for a year with 6 months of aftercare. When they finish their treatment, we recognize their completion of treatment, but they remain on probation until they finish. They have probation fees and based on their ability to pay, and they have other issues they have to take care of. But once if they've done all that after 18 months, on the day they finish their treatment, and the day they finish, that day we terminate the probation, and I sign a form right there in court, and we give them the relief provided under 1210 of the penal code.
Well, I've heard you, all three of you, talk about the lengths you go to try and keep these clients in treatment, after giving them all these chances in 36, which they really aren't entitled to under the law. You then move them either to drug court or to regular probation where there isn't treatment, and it seems that perhaps in the long run they may end up in prison because we weren't able to provide them with the effective treatment that was monitored with sanctions as we have demonstrated in drug court. And I mean that is the great challenge, I think, for all judges today. I don't know if you all agree with that, but I think it seems to be what I hear around the state.
Well, drug court is an unusual, any of the therapeutic courts are an unusual environment, I think, for many of us to find ourselves in. As judicial officers, it's light years away from an arraignment calendar. It's light years away from a straight sentencing calendar, because you do get so involved with the individual defendants, and I think, as Rogelio said, they're global problems sometimes, not just mental health issues. But when you're confronting, for example, in Fresno, which is a very large rural county, we have most of our treatment concentrated in our metropolitan area. And if I have people who live 60 miles away and they have no car, they're frequently employed seasonally. To get in for treatment, they have to pay somebody sometimes $20, $25 for a ride into town. There are problems that are keeping them from treatment that are way beyond their willingness to do it. And they're very real problems. It's not enough to just say, well, you'll find a way, because and we as judges all of a sudden are aware of all that, and we're trying to deal with that, and it's a much more social worker kind of role, I think, than many of us are used to.
And a tremendous
I
challenge.
don't find it uncomfortable, but it's...
No.
The beauty of this, for us as jurists, is that finally it is so satisfying to play a bench role that so invigorates the community, that returns children to their families, husbands to wives, parents to children. I mean, this is a role that we didn't envision when we were sworn in as judicial officers, but has been the most satisfying of my career. The Australian judge who was here last week said to me, and he's a 25-year bench veteran in Australia, he said, and he's had some marvelous assignments over that quarter century, he said, I've been finally kicked upstairs to the finest court of all. He said, treatment courts. He said, this is the apex of my life as a judge.
Well, we have come full circle. Proposition 36 is going to come to an end in terms of its funding. The mandates remain, and the challenges remain for all of us as judges. I think that we live in a time in which judges are taking the steps and playing the leadership roles that have never been seen before in criminal justice. Here we have a new group of clients. They've been with us for 100 years, and they have never received the proper attention. But through Proposition 36 and through, as each of these judges have said, judicial activism, judges standing up, whether it's with the legislature, with the steering committee, with the treatment community, and demanding treatment for the clients that need it, where it is mandated and appropriate, change takes place. And so rather than ending on a sad note, I think this is probably the most positive thing that is coming out of Proposition 36, and that is a judiciary that is fighting for a better system for the defendants that appear before us every day. I want to thank each and every one of you for spending this afternoon with us and participating in this interview. And hopefully your words, your wisdom, your innovation, your spirit will inspire someone out there in the community, another judge, a treatment provider who has given up hope on the courts, to continue to believe in the court system and the important role that it plays in Proposition 36. Thank you again.